Nobody really talks about this. And that's how bleeding, whether you're having a heavy period, and more importantly, and more related to what I'm going to be talking about in this video, if you have an early pregnancy loss or what's called a chemical pregnancy, where you have a period at like the 4.5 to 5.5 week mark, I believe it is, it has a profound effect on multiple factors affecting your overall leptin resistance, your fatigue, your willpower, and your cravings. Welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Emmanuel Armani. I've helped over 100 men and women achieve all their health goals using nature and biophysics, all these things. And any resources that I talk about in this video, I will list in the description so you can, look at that after. But I want to do this video because last year I had what's called a chemical pregnancy or a loss at, about the 5 or so week mark. And there's a number of things that happened to me that no one talks about. And that, then I've had other women who reach out to me and women clients that I have who have experienced the same thing. So I wanted to do a video about it. And that's that. Now, this can happen if you all of a sudden have like a really heavy period, for example, but that's a little bit different. So I'm not necessarily going to go into that aspect of it. And I'm more going to focus on early pregnancy losses and how they can radically change your leptin sensitivity levels and something called IL-6, an inflammatory compound, which can really change the cravings that you get and make your compliance or your ability to then go back and re-implement all these protocols extremely difficult. So, a few examples of things that can happen. One, you can go from waking up with the sunrise with ease to being unable to waking up and even completely sleeping through your alarm. And no, this isn't because you need extra rest. This is because your body clocks have been fundamentally set wrong by the loss of things in your blood when you had the loss. So not just did you lose, you know, you had a loss, but you also lost red blood cells. You also lost something called porphyrins. And both of these things play such a huge role in communicating to your leptin receptors and to your brain, to the master receptor, in a way, and play a huge role in the way in which they absorb and utilize ultraviolet light that you need for the rest of your body. So your sudden loss of all these things has a really profound impact. So it's going to affect your ability to wake up in the morning. It likely will affect your cravings. Well, you'll be craving sugar like crazy. And that's because you've all of a sudden overnight become leptin resistant again, or maybe if you were like improving your leptin sensitivity and then all of a sudden this happened, now things are worse off than they were before. And you are all of a sudden going to be likely craving a lot of foods that you've given up, or your cravings will intensify and make your ability to stick to something like resetting leptin much more difficult. And what does this mean? This means that you have to do three primary things. One, you have to set the stage so that way you can reduce those inflammatory levels and improve as fast as you can the amount of communication that your body can do. So that way your leptin resistance goes down as fast as possible. And I'm going to tell you a few ways in which you can do that in this video, but that's going to be later on. First, I'm going to go through all of these different aspects. And then the other thing is that what often happens is it's not just a loss of iron or the loss of blood, but it's the fact that your red blood cells absorb ultraviolet light really crucially. And it's the fact that these things in your blood called porphyrins then emit a very specific wavelength of light, the same wavelength used in the communication in your leptin-melanocortin pathway, where they're emitting these signals and they play a very key role in this communication. And when you lose a whole ton of them, you also lose your buffer. So you will likely be far more sensitive to non native electromagnetic fields and a loss of the Earth's natural magnetism after this happens to you because whatever buffer you created. Or maybe you didn't have a buffer, I don't know, depending on what stage you are in. But whatever buffer you may have had is completely gone. And it's like, you were sleeping on the bed and now you're sleeping on the floor. You've just eliminated all of that wiggle room, leeway, whatever you want to call it, between you and everything that's happening in your environment. So you're going to be ultra sensitive to all of these things. And that can make things really, really difficult because then it plays into the feedback loop. Your loss of buffer and additional sensitivity to the non native EMFs, the lack of magnetic field in your environment is going to further tank your sleep. It's going to further offset your clocks. It's going to make it even more difficult for you to wake up in the morning. Your cravings are going to go up even more. And it's a mess. Plus, any high intensive processes will be cut like, a bad apple from the batch. Your body's not trying to do that for some sinister reason. It's just trying to keep your core function as alive as it possibly can. So this is why it's really common to see hair loss. And it's not about iron and it's not about the minerals that you lost in your blood. It's about the fact that you've broken overnight all of the signaling that's been happening to your body and destroyed your buffer. So your body has no extra wiggle room to keep all these things functioning for you while it's trying to recover. So, and this is not a super long video. But if you really enjoyed this video and you want me to do a deep dive on a certain aspect of it, just pop it in the comments and I would be happy to do that. So most likely fatigue is going to increase, hair might be an issue. You're going to have a really hard time waking up and your cravings are going to go through the roofs, which means you have to do something about it. So first, let's set the stage around you. First, you want to make sure that you know what you're doing to reset leptin. If you don't, I have a couple of options that I've listed in there. I've got one is like what I did in my first 21 days. This is really the best if this world is relatively new to you and you are really interested in these topics, but you're not really sure where to start. And it's really based on the entry point of like resetting fatigue and sleep as you're in your first 21 days. It also is going to affect so many other aspects too. And it's like how to implement all these things. And then the leptin reset accelerator is kind of your add-on to that, where it's making sure that you really, really know what you're doing when it comes to resetting leptin, because I see so many mistakes in people that have taken, the OG of understanding leptin melanocortin pathway, which was Dr. Cruz, and kind of made it their own. And in making it their own, um, a lot of the details have kind of missed the mark. So there's very specific details in there. And, like I've said so many times, I'm not discovering anything at all. I'm just kind of putting it into a different package that may be more helpful for you to make sure that you don't miss anything. But, anyways, you're going to want to make sure you know exactly how to reset your leptin sensitivity. You're going to make sure that your house environment mitigation is as top tier as you possibly can at the moment, because you're going to increase your sensitivity to this is going to increase. So your habits are going to have to improve. Three, you're going to be reliant on your alarm clock. Any additional rest that you get will have to happen during the day, preferably in sun exposure. You're going to need to really put all of those clocks and force yourself to wake up and get out there. And the more horizon you can see, the better it is. You want to leverage absolutely everything possible to get you back to a better place as fast as possible, because it's a really unpleasant place to be in. I can say that from experience. And then that timing, that your breakfast timing within that hour of the sun coming up for the horizon, is like so important. And I emphasize this when I talk about leptin in the accelerator and when I talk about leptin in the 21-day starting point, the reboot, but like it's just so important. I can't emphasize it enough. And then You also want to make sure that your sleep environment is as good as possible, and you're going to leverage the magnets. I've talked about the magnetic earrings I have. I've talked about buying neodymium magnets for a makeshift, low cost, like Magnetico type thing under your bed. You're going to have to leverage all of those things, like all the copper stuff that you hear going around right now, talking about like, what you're doing is you're trying to create your own miniature magnetic field around you wherever you go, and attempt to make up for the fact that, one, the Earth's magnetic field in general has decreased, and two, our modern world just makes it that much harder for us to actually detect a magnetic field in the first place, which is, confounding factor essentially. And then the you're probably going to switch because it might make changes to your microbiome. You're probably going to want to take your baking soda water in the middle of the day between breakfast and dinner. When again, you don't want to take it around meals because it does affect your stomach acid. And the other thing is you really need to max out on that sun exposure, like getting as dark a tan as possible, because that's the other thing that can happen to you is you can suddenly lose your tan because your body is using this system in an attempt to make more of everything else just to keep the baseline functions running, that is going to eat your tan in the process. So the more you can provide it with the fuel it needs to begin all of its repair mechanisms, so that way you get out of this position as possible, is you're really going to have to max out on building that tan. And obviously, if you have the ability to take a quick vacation when this happens, like in the process of recovery, that's going to be by far the best and best. There's some other options that sometimes I talk about, but it's really individual dependent. Like, I myself in the past, when I'm really sick, have used, like, from a cold or flu or whatever, I've used low EMF tanning beds. I'm really particular. I take my cornet meter to them. And yes, it's 100%, it's a circadian disruption. There are risks to that. It's not a good option, but sometimes in a pinch, you got to do what you got to do. And I appreciate that. But it's not to be confused with the idea that it's like a good option. It's kind of like a last resort. I don't really have a choice. I got to do something kind of situation. And if you have any kind of risk factors, like, um, low HDL, highly sensitive C reactive protein, and a few other things, this is not even an option for you. And the sad thing is that a lot of those lamps at home, they're not powerful enough, right? Ideally, you want that infrared, red, and UVA, UVB all paired together from the sun in a non polarized fashion. So the most amount of time you can spend outside, all of these things, is going to be number one. And then, lastly, but probably most importantly, is that in order to get a hold of your cravings, most likely, which is going to be difficult, in order to actually stick to resetting leptin and being extremely strict for 6 weeks, because you're going to have to be more strict than you've ever had to be in your life when coming out of early pregnancy loss or chemical pregnancy, and it's going to feel unfair and unpleasant. But it's the way to get you to better fast. And you're going to want to leverage a cold like nobody's business. And you're not going to do like an ice bath or something like that. You're going to do cold tap water with nothing else in the bathtub. If you have a bathtub, if you don't have a bathtub, you get a kiddie pool or some kind of inflatable pool and you fill it up and you get in there, and you're going to want to do like a lot of cold. You're going to want to be in there for 45 minutes. So pump up the temperature as much as you need to for 45 minutes to be possible. Um, Obviously, like, I'm assuming you've had some kind of experience with cold exposure, because if you have none, then you're going to have to go through a certain adaptation phase. But assuming that you've done some cold exposure, assuming that you already eat, a lot of seafood and fish, that your omega 3 to 6 ratios aren't horrible, that you're not just like coming into this totally blind. Because if you are, then do check out the 21-day fatigue reset, because that's where I kind of walk you through if you're more brand new to this. Um, I mean, it's all basic stuff, but if you're really brand new, you're going to have to make sure you're doing all those things first before you can really start with a cold, which is a little unfortunate. But, if you go up to like 60, 65 degrees, 70 degrees Fahrenheit and stay in there for, an hour, something like that, it's still going to be really, really helpful. Even ice packs, applying ice packs to your body, ice packs on your neck, you can put ice packs on your stomach, you can do things like that. You want to lower your IL-6 fast, and the cold is the best way to do that. And it's the best way to kind of, help you reset leptin as fast as possible, because there's just, you can drag this out. I did. I dragged it out for so long because I didn't really understand how your body responds so radically differently after an event like this to all of these things than it did before. I never had to be super strict before. I got all of these results without being super strict. But after that happened to me, I had to be really strict. I still have to be quite strict because for so long I wasn't, and I was just diddly daddling instead of going all in on the cold and being super strict with resetting leptin, everything that encompasses. I mean, my EMF stuff is really down packed as much as it's possibly in my control. And the other thing that's really, really great for this is spending a lot of time in the forest. So if you have days off, if you can take, one day off and go somewhere hiking where you're surrounded by trees, where you can be grounded, maybe even near water to be relaxing, if you have access to something like that. Lots of greenery, we're getting lots of green light, and you wear as little clothing as possible. If it's warm, if it's cold, again, it's going to be more difficult if it's cold, except if it's cold. Then you can kind of leverage the cold in these situations where you're not wearing a shawl. You're bringing some layers, especially if you intend to stay out there for a long time, but you're going to try to keep a low dose coolness happening all the time. And the other quick trick for cold that you can do is when you go in the car, especially is like in the warmer weather, you can pump up the air conditioning to the maximum. Make sure you still have a window open a little bit so you're letting that natural light come into the car, but you're using the air conditioning in the car to then reduce your inflammation and help you reset leptin sensitivity faster. So to recap, um, first of all, it's a shame that this is called chemical pregnancy, oftentimes because it takes away from the way women can feel in this situation. And also, it takes away from the huge impact that is the whole reason why I'm doing this video that no one talks about, that this can have on you and how you feel. It can take you from feeling pretty good to all of a sudden making 100 things that you've never had to deal with for a while, if you've been doing this for a while, reoccur. And then if you try the same strategies that you did before and you find that they're not working, now you know why. You have to go all in like nobody's business, like you've never done before, and you have to do it fast because it's going to be extremely difficult for the first several weeks. I would even dare say your first 4 weeks, you're just going to be like grinding against the resistance until you get to the point where you're like, oh, yeah. But I will say that leveraging the cold for like an hour every other day at the minimum makes such a huge and immediate impact on your cravings. It's not even funny. So it's a really big point that I don't think is driven home enough. I really hope you found this helpful. Always love to hear your feedback in there, and I'll catch you on the next one. And if you're not subscribed, do subscribe.